Hi, folks. With Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. Excuse me. In this essay, I'd like to talk about an incident. In fact, a number of incidents, not only in North America but around the world. But I'll focus on North America just to kick this presentation off. This is a fire department in a decent sized city in the United States. And it was determined that even in the city, even though the city's got something like 43%, give or take, black population, and around the same white population, the rest being made up of, Hispanic or Asian or whatever, that in spite of the large black population, only a small proportion of applicants to the local fire and fire rescue department, only a small percentage of those were black. Now, the reason for that's fairly straightforward. There was a standardized test that everybody had to take, a suitability standardized test. Can you calculate or compute how many lengths of hose are needed to go the distance from the fire truck to the building that's on fire that you're trying to put the fire out. So basic stuff. The truck is 100 meters away from the burning building. The length of hoses are 50 meters or 50 yards. And so how many lengths of hose are needed? Well, 100 meters, lengths of hose are 50. 2 times 50 makes 100. So you need 2 lengths of 50-meter hose. Very simple arithmetic and very simple mathematics. I could have done that in early primary school and done it with ease, by the way. But these were the questions that were stumping the black applicants, this was the blacks were failing the test. Not that it was an onerous test, far from it. Again, any primary school kid or early school kid could have passed the test, and yet the black applicants weren't passing it. Bear in mind they're in their 20s, these applicants. So anyway, only a small percentage, I think it was less than 5% of the department had black employees in it, and 95%, or give or take, were white. Now, this shouldn't have been an issue. If you've got an issue with people failing a test, it's a standardized test that everybody takes, then you'd say, well, look, we'll give you special coaching, or we'll, if you want to go to night school to do mathematics and literacy, then, we'll give you a special scholarship to do it. So, those type, that's how you would improve people's chances or capacity to pass. Or again, basic tests. These are not onerous tests. Far from it. But the realities are quite a bit different. And I'll go into sort of the back channels and the subterranean channels in this, because it goes wider than simply equal outcomes. And it's a whole visage of activism and ideology and fanaticism and so on, NGOs, the whole lot goes into the mix. So anyway, the Federal Department of Justice comes along and says, look, the outcomes are not equal. Don't have an equal number of blacks and whites being hired, so the outcomes are not equal. Don't care about the reason, but we're going to assert, because the outcomes are not equal, and on that basis alone, that there must be racism. There must be. The outcomes are different. So they start and I'll simplify this a little bit, they start a legal campaign against the city and against the fire department. This is the Federal Justice, so-called Department of Justice, which is indicating by even going down this path that it is shot through with activism from top to bottom, and that the law is now seen as a device for bringing about the sort of ideological change that the fanatics want. It's not about the law anymore, or crime, and far from it, which is, by the way, what happened to the communist ideological dictatorships, as they saw the law as a way of creating sort of outcomes they wanted rather than punishing crime. So, and this is the same sort of thing. So the Federal Department of Justice comes along now. It's given that the case, because there's no definition of what is racism here, there's no definition of how they're determining the test is racist. There's no definition of anything. So it's impossible to bring a case really like this or to fight it, which is really the material point of this. How can you fight a case that has no definitions, that has no, they're not saying you've broken the law. They're saying the outcomes are different. Because the outcomes are different, we therefore assert that you have broken the law. We're not showing how you have broken or anything. So it becomes a vexatious nuisance case. And this will drag through the courts possibly for years. It'll bankrupt the city. It'll bankrupt the fire department because the federal government has far more resources than this. So the idea of this case isn't to actually determine wrongdoing or criminality or anything like that. It's not the point. And they can find activist judges, and they can also appeal it through. So if you get a lower court judge to throw it out, the Federal Department of Justice will just take it to another court, and then another, and then another, and then another. So again, you'd be bankrupted on the fees, and also something that drags on for that long. So they then come to what's considered or what's treated as effectively a consent decree, that the parties to the litigation effectively negotiate a settlement. And so we won't harass you anymore through lawfare if you do what we want. And that's really the nub of it. What do you want? Well, we want you to effectively get rid of all testing. Any merit-based testing, no matter how easy and no matter how non-onerous it is, any merit-based testing is out. And you have to produce effectively equal outcomes on the hiring. So it doesn't matter if someone can't add up the length of hose, or it doesn't matter if someone can't add up or can't write out a report, or they're illiterate and they can't do basic arithmetic. It doesn't matter. We just want the equal racial outcomes. That's what matters. That's what you have. If you deliver that, then we'll leave you alone. So now, of course, this results in a number of other compensatory changes. They have to invent jobs, because there are certain jobs where you have to have people who know what they're doing. Those jobs just don't go away. They're still there. But if you have to pad out the department with all sorts of people who can't do the job, then you have to create positions for them where they're effectively irrelevant to the day-to-day running of the fire department, or indeed irrelevant to the putting out of fires. So now, say the department, for example, I'll use round numbers here, say the fire department of the city employs 100 people, and only 5 of them are black. Now, you've got to create jobs for something like 50 odd black people there, but you can't give them jobs where performance is a requirement, because they can't perform. They can't write, they can't read, they can't do basic mathematics. So you've got to invent jobs for them and invent these irrelevant jobs. But then you've got all these extra people who have to, you've got to have the office space, they've got to have a desk, and so on and so forth. So the fire department's budget suddenly goes through that, which means people have to be taxed more to pay for it. Or that worthwhile programs, such as, I don't know, collecting garbage or something like that, they have to be cut back on, so the money can be found to pay for all these extra people that aren't needed and can't do anything. And I see this a lot in the corporate world, because DEI and ESG and equal outcomes play such a big role. There are vast numbers of jobs being created in HR departments, in marketing departments, in you name it, where people who actually can't do any work, they're utterly incapable of it, are being put into creative positions, just to do the numbers. There's a huge industry in government for employing people from India, for example, and there are these invented jobs that are given. So it comes at a large cost, but in terms of the optics and the so-called pursuit of racial equity, then it looks good. But the reality is, the meaningful jobs are all still being done by the white people who did pass the test, or anyone who passed the test. It just happens to be all white people. But there are a number of things here. Firstly, in this city in the United States, the population, it has a large black population. That city has one of the most activist, social justice, race hustling activist divisions or chapters in the United States. Martin Luther King's been there, and all this sort of stuff, and also a number of race activist hustling NGOs have a strong presence there. So there's a huge race hustling activist network in this city, and they are going around looking for things to get upset about. A bit like the Christian baker in Colorado, where seems like every day a trans group or a race group or a lesbian group is trying to get him to bake a cake, and then when he doesn't do it or doesn't do it to their specification, they magically find the money to take it to the Supreme Court of the United States. And then this Christian baker's been harassed for 10 years with lawfare that's aggressively and maliciously being funded by all sorts of activist groups. So we see the same thing here. So what's happened? Large black population, a massive sort of race hustling activist network of hustlers and schemers and plotters and malicious folks hatching plots of all sorts of things. And so they've sort of tried to heavy and hustle and slap around the fire department locally. It hasn't worked. So they've gone to the federal government. Now, remember, these are underground channels. Remember, the fire department's broken no law. No one's engaged or guilty of any criminal act here at all. That the activists simply don't like it. And because they can't find a law that's been broken or anything of that nature, because again, the test applies to anybody who wants to join the fire department. It's not given only to this group or that group, or one group isn't given tougher questions to another group. It's exactly the same standardized test throughout. So they've gone to the federal government using the underground back channels of activism and so on. Well, make these guys do what we want. We're race hustlers. We want this outcome. And so the justice, this is where the politicizing of justice comes in, or the politicizing of law. No law has been broken. There is no law that's been broken. There is no criminal act. There is no criminal personage in the mix here, other than the people trying to do the race hustling. They're the criminals. So they've gone to the Federal Department of Justice, that sat down and gone through their equity thing. Okay, well, given the outcomes are different, as in the amount of blacks being hired versus whites, given the outcomes are different, we will just assert that it's because of racism, and we won't prove it. We won't define what crime. We'll just say it. We'll just assert it. And because we own the budget, because we have the money to do it and the time and the malicious will to do it, we'll go after these guys until they do what we want. And we'll effectively bully them and bludgeon them and make their lives as miserable as possible. Have them all sort of, living, have them all in a state of high anxiety, and we'll just pursue them. If we need activist judges, we'll find them and we'll make sure those judges hear the case, and so on and so on. So there's a whole infrastructure of activism going that runs from the black activists at street level right through into, effectively the same people, right through into the Federal Department of Justice. So in the event the city or the fire department in the city cave and go, okay, fine, just stop harassing us so you can have what you want. But in the end, it's the citizens who pay. The jobs are created, but then the budget has to be bigger, as I mentioned earlier, and then taxes have to be increased, or money has to be found from more worthwhile endeavors. Now, this is the same. This happens sort of. We don't realize how often this is happening, and how often it doesn't make the media, or it doesn't make. We don't hear about it. An LGBT group can say, well, look, there's painting classes that go on, at the local community college. They do painting classes, but there's no special LGBTQ painting class. So we're going to say that because there is no special class, that we're being discriminated against. It is therefore homophobia. It is therefore fascist Nazi. So they can create this whole sort of fantasy delusional narrative. And then they could, through the activist networks, of which again have pretty much taken over the US Department of Justice, and indeed other departments of justice around the Western world. Wherever the globalists are in control, this is what's happening. And so, the globalists are doing it for the sole purpose of creating social dysfunction. So they can then go to the Federal Department of Justice and can come into the city and say, well, you have to, if you don't set up a special LGBTQ painting class, we're going to legally harass you and bankrupt you until you do what we want. But again, they're not asserting there was a crime or there's a criminal act or anything like that. There's no law being broken. There is no criminal here. They're just saying, we want this outcome. We'll harass you, lawfare harass you until. Now, in a saner time, any attempt to firstly, you'd never get signed off on a budget to go and do this. The activists in Justice Department would never have got a job in the first place. So we need to understand that activists have been knowingly hired and put into the Justice Department to do this sort of work, to do this sort of thing, to harass good people and normal people. That's what they've been put there for. They've been given a budget to do it. That budget gets signed up. We want to go after the city for not hiring enough black lesbians. You go get them. Go get them. And that would never happen in the same world. Also, what would never happen in the same world is you couldn't bring this case to court. Any sane non-activist judge would look at it and go, "What? You can't even point to a crime in your filing. I'm throwing this out. Stop wasting my time. Get the fuck out of my face," and so on. That's not happening because they're activist judges, because they've got activists planted everywhere. Now, in addition to that, there's a whole activist network in this case in this city, very large and very well funded black activist race hustling network, and they are constantly scanning everything for something they can find to get offended. Any difference in outcome anywhere for anything, for any reason, is cited as, there we go, Hitler is at it again, and off they go. But in the same world, that would never have happened. And again, in the same world, I got no problem if black people want to work in the fire department or end up being employed in the fire department. It makes no difference to me. It makes no difference to me who's there, as long as they're competent. That's what I care about. And so if you want to help black students or black applicants, rather, apply for, or anybody, it doesn't matter, anyone apply for these jobs and coach them and educate them, and again, give them a scholarship to night school or so, special firefighters applicant night school. So, give them a free school to go to and help. Now, if they don't turn up for the school, that's their lookout, but supply, give them the help. If that's your problem, not enough black people are passing the test, which is what's going on here, then help them to do it. And again, give them that night school. That's where you put the effort and the time and the money, not mass level subversion, which is what's going on at the moment. Now, we see this not just in race hustling, but in gender hustling and so on. And it's really ramping up. And there's quite a few judges complain about how many frivolous, ridiculous, zero evidence lawsuits are being brought against, brought by women supposedly for some sort of sexual misconduct. If it's now a crime, maybe it's been this way for a while, I'm not exactly sure, but it's called upskirting. Now, I didn't know people actually did this. I mean, would anybody actually do it? I mean, seriously. So if a man looks up a woman's skirt, that's now a crime, and it can be taken into court. It can actually, a prison sentence can be had. I mean, can you believe this? And so the feminized and radicalized gender hustling, again, masses of hustlers and activists have been put into these justice departments, and they don't see the law as law anymore. So the law, facts, evidence, you've got to be kidding. That's bullshit. We're into social change and so social justice, and so the law and the facts don't matter. So they'll go chasing after straight white men. And I mean, if they're straight and white and Christian, hey, you've got the trifecta there. Go after them with zero evidence. Now let's hope that an activist judge will hear the case, but in the higher courts where people can be sent to prison and for longer terms, this sort of thing. The activists haven't got complete control of those courts yet, but they will unless we take action sort of now. That they will have control of those courts soon. And you see this in all sorts, the activist courts, like, divorce courts and that sort of thing. It's just shot through with activists who don't care about the facts or evidence. It's ideology. Hey, you straight white Christian male, you're a fucking Nazi. That's it. You're Hitler, and then they make decisions along ideological lines rather than ever, which is what's happening, of course, in the US with. So anything about race and gender and the three big fault lines are race, gender, and sexuality, as in LGBTQ. And you're looking at wherever those issues are appearing in a so-called justice-related matter, then the people handling it, with rare exception, are activists, extreme-level activists, and their only measurement of success is, do they get the outcomes they want? That's it. The law, merit, facts, evidence, they don't care. It's, do they get the social outcome they want? And that's how they measure success, and how they measure the merits of a case. Black people are only getting 5% of the jobs. Racism. Well, we got to stop this, and so on. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.